My husband's secretary posted a picture on Instagram, a red candle burning, with the caption, "The light will pierce through the darkness and break all fear." In the photo, my husband's hand was also visible, wearing the anniversary gift I gave him for our 7th year together. The night I was hospitalized after losing our baby, my husband was with his secretary, comforting her because she was afraid of the dark when the power went out at her place. We had been together since we were young, from school uniforms to wedding dresses. Our love, once envied by others, ultimately couldn't survive the 7-year itch. On the anniversary of my mother's death, my husband, Will, was absent-minded all day. That evening, he took a call and left in a hurry, leaving me behind. After dinner, I saw his secretary's Instagram post. I couldn't stop my thoughts from racing. While showering, I accidentally slipped, and sharp pain shot through my abdomen. Staring blankly at the bright red liquid pooling beneath me, I thought it was just my period. But the pain didn't stop, and the blood kept flowing. Realizing something was terribly wrong, I tried to call for help, but my phone was still on the nightstand. Feeling weak, I supported myself against the wall and slowly made my way out. What should have been just a few steps felt as long as the first half of my life. After calling an ambulance, I rang Will. This time, someone answered. "Hello?" A woman's voice. I knew immediately, it was his secretary, Nina. "Will is in the shower," she said. My heart skipped a beat, and I hung up abruptly. Strangely, I wasn't even that upset. It felt more like confirmation, something I had been suspecting. Will was having an affair. I had already sensed it. We had been in a cold phase in our marriage. A year ago, he started leaving early and coming home late, often on business trips. When he was home, he would go straight to the study. We barely talked, and when we did, it never took more than 10 sentences for us to end up fighting. Fights were a regular thing, usually followed by days of silence. He'd stay out for a few days, then come back with a gift, and I'd reluctantly let it go. He was always busy, working overtime even on holidays, despite being the boss. Sometimes, I wondered if the company was going bankrupt, because he couldn't seem to spare even half a day. This year, on Valentine's Day, I prepared a romantic candlelit dinner, waiting until 11 p.m. Then he texted saying he had to work late. The cold food went straight into the trash. Before our wedding anniversary, we had another fight. He came home late, drunk, reeking of alcohol, and passed out the moment he hit the bed. The next day, I gave him the watch I had spent so long picking out. He awkwardly promised he'd wear it every day, and true to his word, he hasn't taken it off since. I thought maybe all couples went through this stage, that we just needed to understand each other better to make it through. So I cautiously started changing myself, learning new recipes, updating my wardrobe, trying to bring some freshness back, hoping to revive our relationship. But now I understand, it wasn't the 7-year itch. It was his heart that had strayed. In the end, it was my best friend, Sophia, who came first. She walked in, eyes red, and stayed by my bedside all night. Will finally showed up the next morning, around 10. He was wearing the same clothes from yesterday, clearly trying to tidy himself up, but I could still see the creases in his shirt. The moment Sophia saw him, she flew into a rage. "Is this how you treat your wife? Do you even know she had a miscarriage? We called you all night and you didn't pick up. People might have thought you died in a ditch somewhere." Hearing this, Will stared in disbelief at my flat stomach, muttering, "That's impossible." "Impossible? I'm telling you, Will, if you can't be a decent husband, then get out of the way. Let Amanda go. Nobody needs to suffer like this because of you." Will ignored her. He glanced at me, reaching out for my stomach, but his hand stopped midair, trembling uncontrollably. I stared at his wrist and asked in a hoarse voice, "Where's your watch?" "What?" He responded absent-mindedly, then realized it was missing and said casually, "I left it at the office." So, this is how easily men lie, calm and without a trace. A wave of disgust surged through me, and I felt physically nauseous. I didn't want to look at him anymore. Weakly, I turned my back and said, "I don't want to see you right now. Amanda, I told you to get out." Sophia shoved him out of the room, cursing him the entire time. My tears soaked the pillow. I pressed a hand to my stomach, feeling the emptiness beneath it. There should have been life there. The baby was barely 2 months along. I had just found out I was pregnant, hadn't even had time to feel the joy or excitement, and now he was gone. If Will hadn't left last night, would things have been different? Or if I hadn't seen that picture, maybe my baby would have survived. The child I had longed for all these 7 years was lost because of me. My dad passed away when I was young, and my mom died 5 years ago. Growing up in a broken family, I always dreamed of having a child, of building my own complete family. We had been married for 7 years, but because of my health, it had been hard for us to conceive. For a while, I was obsessed with trying different remedies, hoping to get pregnant, but it only made me miserable. Back then, Will still cared. Seeing what I was putting myself through, he lost his temper, banning me from trying any more weird concoctions. He swore that if I drank any of it, he'd drink the whole pot himself. He said, if it comes to it, we'll go to the hospital together. I never brought it up again, but deep down, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I once had a dream. In it, we had a child who looked like both of us. We were a family of 3, bathed in the sunset. The baby was riding on Will's shoulders, and he was holding my hand. We were walking home, the sunset casting long, long shadows. But that day will never come. I stayed in the hospital for 2 more days. During the day, Will stayed outside the room, too scared to come in, just peeking in through the door, exactly the same as when he made mistakes in the early days of our relationship. The other patients didn't know what was going on. They thought we were just a regular couple who had a small fight. They praised Will while trying to convince me. You two shouldn't be so stubborn. He seems like a good man, watching over you every day. Can't you just talk things out? Couples should make up at the foot of the bed, right? I glanced at the man outside, who looked a lot like some big, clueless dog. I've already made up my mind, I said. Don't worry. Before I was discharged, I asked a lawyer to draft up divorce papers. Will came to pick me up, and Sophia glared at him for ages before reluctantly letting me get in the car. I hadn't told her about his affair, only that I was divorcing him. Even so, Sophia believed it was something he did to hurt me. Only after getting in the car did I see Nina sitting in the passenger seat. She was dressed in a sleek black business suit, her makeup light but polished. She looked vibrant and confident as usual. Flashing her bright smile, she greeted me. Hi, Amanda. We just came from a meeting, and Will is giving me a ride. Hope you don't mind. I glanced at her and replied coldly, I do mind. She was stunned for a moment, clearly not expecting my bluntness, but she quickly recovered, casting a pitiful look at Will. Will cleared his throat, trying to smooth things over. She's just joking. Amanda, Nina's place is on the way, so I'll drop her off first. I silently turned to stare out the window. Out of sight, out of mind. Halfway there, Will's phone rang. Nina answered it effortlessly, bringing the phone to his ear as he spoke, then pulling it away when he finished. I watched their seamless routine, once the same as mine and Will's. Anyone watching would probably think I was the third wheel here. Will must have realized how strange it looked, glancing nervously at me in the rearview mirror and awkwardly explaining. It's just that driving makes it hard to answer calls, so Nina helps out. Yeah, don't get me wrong. Nina took the chance when Will wasn't looking and gave me a smug smile. I found it incredibly amusing. Going on a business trip and the boss has to drive himself? I bet Nina sat right next to him the whole time. After all these years, managing such a big company, yet still so clueless. Will and I got together right after graduating from high school. He was my desk mate back then. He wasn't great at studying, and after bombing a test, I asked him what he had been doing in class. He casually replied, just watching you. Back in school, I was the goody two-shoes, and it took him 3 years of chasing before I finally agreed to date him. I had my sights set on University A, and to get into the same school, he woke up at 5 a.m. every day during his senior year, studying until 1 a.m. Will was terrible at certain subjects, so we didn't end up at the same university. On the day the results came out, he cried his heart out by the river, and his best friend dragged me over to comfort him. He was sobbing, stuttering apologies like a little girl. I told him, long distance isn't impossible. It took him a moment to process that, but when he did, he excitedly lifted me up and spun me around. In the end, he enrolled in the school next to University A and studied finance. In his third year, he started a business with some friends. Things went well at first, and they even had a period of success. But by the time I was interning in my senior year, their business was bleeding money, almost to the point of shutting down. At that time, Will smoked and drank every day. His whole body reeked of cigarettes and alcohol, completely defeated. I couldn't stand seeing him like that, so in a fit of impulse, I told him I'd help him rebuild the business. I quit my job, joined his company, and became his assistant and secretary. Then, it turned into both of us drinking at those business dinners. There's no avoiding alcohol at those things, even if Will tried to shield me from it. You meet all kinds of people at those events. Once, we finally secured an investment, but the person in charge was a bald old man who sat next to me, pouring drink after drink, his murky eyes lingering on me. His hand started wandering, almost touching my leg, and Will saw it. He completely lost it, beating the man to a pulp. If no one had stepped in, Will might have killed him. That night, his eyes were bloodshot as he pulled me tightly into his arms, repeating my name over and over. Warm tears dripped onto the back of my neck as he said, "Never again. I'll protect you. You won't have to suffer anymore." In the first year the company showed signs of recovery, we got our marriage certificate. The wedding was grand. He promised me he'd love, protect, and cherish me for the rest of my life. When you're young, it's easy to be moved. I cried my eyes out at the wedding, thinking it was the start of happiness. In all the perfect love stories, the happiness ends there. Little did I know, that was only the beginning of another story. For me, it was destined to be a tragic one. As the company grew over the years, I lost interest in the business world. After talking it over with Will, I resigned and took 15% of the company shares. I majored in photography in college, and over the past 2 years, I've opened my own studio, taking portraits for people and occasionally posting short videos online. Slowly, I gained a bit of a following and made some money. Nina joined the company right after I left. At first, Will would tell me about his new secretary, how meticulous and reliable she was. Later, he said she looked so pitiful sitting on the steps with a stomachache, reminding him of a younger version of me. I had added Nina on social media by then. She'd post photos of her and her colleagues working or eating together, with Will often standing right next to her. I was too busy with my studio to pay much attention and even told him to take good care of the new girl. Now, looking back, it feels laughably ironic. The housekeeper took a month off, and it wasn't until Will came home and realized no one was cooking that he asked me. "The housekeeper's son is sick and she took a month off. Didn't you come home?" He awkwardly explained, "I've been visiting you at the hospital during the day, and with so much work piling up, I've been going to the office at night." I looked him up and down, as if seeing him for the first time. He was in his early 30s, not overweight like most men his age. Handsome, wealthy, with an air of authority, a figure most people would consider successful. But he didn't resemble the man who once promised me a lifetime together. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "Nothing," I shook my head. "Since the housekeeper's not here, are you cooking tonight?" "I haven't eaten your cooking in years. Make me a meal." He was about to refuse, but after hearing the second part, he hesitated and then nodded. There was no food at home, so I told him to go buy groceries himself. Maybe out of guilt, he agreed to everything I asked. After he left, I sat in the empty house, lost in thought. After we got married, we moved from our rented apartment to this villa. It had only been 4 days since I'd last been home, yet it felt like a lifetime ago. I wandered around the villa, from the gate to the garden, then into the living room. Every flower, every piece of furniture, all of it had been carefully selected by us. In the center of the garden stood a tall silk tree, with a bed of roses underneath, my favorite flowers. It was hard to let go. Will came back soon, carrying lots of groceries. I leaned against the kitchen door, watching him busy himself, my mind drifting back to when we first moved in together. After college, we rented a tiny apartment. Back then, we were so poor, Will had to cook every meal. At first, he couldn't even tell sugar from salt, but eventually, he became quite the cook. After his business took off, he got caught up in socializing and never cooked at home again. I always thought he would have lost his touch by now. While I was in the hospital, I ignored Will, but obsessively checked Nina's IG every day, hoping to find some clue. On the second day of my hospital stay, Nina posted a picture of a home-cooked meal, all dishes I used to love. I was sensitive, and the moment I saw it, I noticed the faint smell of food on Will when he came to visit. There wasn't enough evidence to prove anything, just a few photos and a smell, but deep down, I had a hunch Will had made that meal. The man who hadn't cooked in years went to someone else's house to cook while I was in the hospital. The day I lost our child, my heart was filled with hatred. I plotted countless ways to make them pay, imagining Will leaving with nothing, Nina's reputation in ruins. But when I saw that photo, I suddenly realized it didn't matter anymore. The love was gone, the child was gone. No amount of scheming would do anything but waste my time and energy. Will still remembered my favorite spicy dishes, an entire table of red. What he didn't know was that someone recovering from illness shouldn't eat such things. "Why aren't you eating?" I dodged the question. "It must taste amazing, right?" He said, "Why don't you try it yourself?" I smiled my brightest smile in days and asked him, "Does the food outside taste better than what we have at home?" He looked at me, confused. I stood up, took out the envelope from the sofa, and handed it to him. "Divorce papers. 2 copies. Let's get a divorce." "Amanda, don't joke about this." His face darkened instantly. "I'm not joking. The baby was just an accident. I didn't know that day, but if I had known, what difference would it have made?" I cut him off. "Even if you knew I was pregnant, you still would have left me to go find Nina." Hearing this, his face showed a hint of panic. "Don't say you wouldn't, Will. You said you had work that day, but really, it was because the power went out at Nina's house, right? She's afraid of the dark, so after one call, you drove 3 hours to go be with her. The day my mom died, you were out of town. You stayed on the phone with me all night, saying you'd never leave me alone again, that whatever happened, you'd always be by my side. I've always thought I was decisive, that I could coldly end this failed marriage. But when the moment finally came, I couldn't stop my nose from stinging. You broke that promise, so I tried to hold back my sobs. Let's get a divorce." "Amanda," Will's face went pale, his voice dry. "It's my fault. I shouldn't have lied to you that day. But you have to believe me, Amanda. Nothing happened between us. I really didn't betray you. I swear I won't ever leave you for someone else again. I'll keep my distance from her. Just give me another chance, okay? Let's not get divorced, please?" I didn't know if I could still trust his words, but I was very clear on one thing: Nina wasn't the problem between us. Even if there was no Nina, there would be an Anna, or a Gina. At the core of it, he was the type of man who would stray. I once heard someone say that love, when it fades, inevitably turns into something like family. It was that familiarity that made us weary of each other. But it was also that same familiarity that kept us tied together. Maybe I could believe they just slept under the same roof for one night without anything happening, but I couldn't lie to myself. Their behavior wasn't innocent. Emotional betrayal is still betrayal, and to me, it's even more disgusting than physical cheating. I couldn't accept that my husband was thinking of another woman while eating and sleeping beside me. That in my hardest, most vulnerable moments, he was worrying about someone else. Before we got married, you promised that if we ever divorced, you'd walk away with nothing. I'm not asking you to do that, but I want 5% more of the company shares, in addition to the 15% I already have. And the house and the car. I don't care how many properties you have elsewhere, and the car doesn't matter either, but this house is mine. I designed and decorated this house myself. Just the thought of Nina or some other woman standing where I stood, enjoying everything I created, made my heart feel like it was being twisted. Now, Will was acting like he was madly in love with me, wearing down his lips explaining everything about Nina. That day, Nina twisted her ankle coming down the stairs, then the power went out at her place, and she didn't even get to eat dinner. When she went out to get food, she felt like someone was following her, so she called Will for help. I was just worried something might happen to her. Nothing went on between us. Men always know how to make excuses for themselves. If someone was following her, you could have called the police. If the power was out, she could have called maintenance. She could have even asked another coworker to stay with her. But out of all the solutions, you chose to drive 3 hours to be with her. I grabbed a pen, signed my name on both copies of the divorce papers, and handed them to him. What's the point of all this? Just sign it. It'll be better for both of us. I won't agree to this. He snatched the papers from my hand, his anger pouring out as he ripped them to shreds, scattering to pieces all over the floor. You can forget about it. I'm not agreeing to a divorce. With that, he slammed the door and left. He didn't come home for 4 days. He's always like this, acting on impulse, never growing up. Whenever something happens that he doesn't want to face, he runs away. When his business failed, he drowned his sorrows in alcohol, numbing himself day after day. Now, he thought that if he avoided me long enough, this whole thing would blow over and we could go back to how we were before. When his friend called to tell me that Will was drunk at a bar and asked if I could pick him up, I happened to be on a trip in S City. Will's drunk and he keeps calling your name. He won't let any of us near him. Can you come and get him? The person on the other end asked cautiously. I had just gotten off the plane, feeling dizzy and irritable. I blurted out, "No, I can't," and hung up. They called a few more times. I turned off my phone and joined the crowd leaving the airport. Sophia's long-distance relationship with her boyfriend Sam had finally come to an end after 3 years. They were planning to get married early next year. Her fiancé was from S City, and this trip was to meet his parents and take their wedding photos. I had brought 2 assistants along. We planned to finish the photo shoot in 2 days and then spend a few more days enjoying ourselves. But after just 1 day at the beach, I fell sick. I usually don't get sick, so I figured my body still hadn't fully recovered. Maybe you should see a doctor? No need, it's just dizziness. I'll be fine after some rest. Sophia handed me a cup of hot water, glancing at her phone now and then. Go spend time with your boyfriend. You've waited long enough for this reunion. I'll just get some sleep. After I reassured her that I wasn't feeling too bad, she finally left. 2 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I thought she must have forgotten something, but when I opened the door, I saw a man with a weary face. Amanda. Will? The man in front of me had messy hair, a scruffy beard, dark circles under his eyes, and a wrinkled suit. His disheveled appearance startled me. He had always been so concerned about appearances, even after our worst fights, he could still act like the perfect loving husband in front of others. Now, I barely recognized him. Frowning, I asked, "What happened to you?" His bloodshot eyes filled with desperation as he stepped forward and hugged me, resting his head on my shoulder, mumbling, "Amanda, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Faintly, I could smell alcohol mixed with an unfamiliar scent. His odor was overwhelming, making my dizziness even worse. As he leaned in closer, I suddenly snapped out of it and instinctively pushed him away. He wasn't prepared, and stumbled into the door handle, his face twisting in pain. Come inside. After all, we were still married. I couldn't be that heartless. The impact had left a bruise on his lower back, and soon a purple mark spread across the area. I lifted his shirt a bit more, to inspect the bruise. Above it, there was a small wound that had already started to scab. Something flickered in my mind, but I didn't dwell on it. I called the hotel for some medicinal liquor to treat him. Still feverish, I didn't realize that I had pressed too hard while applying the medicine, and he inhaled sharply through his teeth. It's fine, it doesn't hurt, he said quickly before I could say anything. Was it my imagination, or did he sound a little happy? Once I finished treating his wound, I immediately asked him to leave. He gave me a pitiful look, his eyes filled with sorrow. Amanda, You got hurt because of me, and I'm sorry for that. That's why I helped you. But don't get the wrong idea. I'm not changing my mind about the divorce. His voice turned hoarse. Can't we not get divorced? No, we can't. I said as I pushed him toward the door, but he grabbed me back, nearly begging. We'll have another child in the future. I know I've been neglecting you lately, and I know you're hurt, but it won't happen again. We can go back to how we were. It's just a little problem. It's not bad enough to divorce over, right? In the end, he couldn't accept that his steady marriage was ending so suddenly, without warning. He couldn't believe that the woman who had always stood by his side would finally decide to leave him. He was used to doing whatever he wanted. Back then, he'd stay up all night studying because of a fleeting crush. In college, he fearlessly pursued his entrepreneurial dreams. And when he met someone new and exciting, he would neglect me. He never thinks about the consequences. When he got bad grades, he would hide and cry. When his business failed, he drowned himself in alcohol. Whenever there were problems in our relationship, he'd seek out someone who gave him a sense of excitement. But this time, I don't want to pick up the pieces for him anymore. Will, I called him, just like I used to. I know you, and you know me just as well. You don't need to make excuses for yourself, and you don't need to cover for me either. You're already tired of this, and my love is running out. What's the point of this broken marriage? He couldn't find the words to respond. Slowly, he let go of my hand and left without saying another word. After Will left that day, looking completely lost, I thought he would disappear for a while. But to my surprise, in the following days, he started showing up around me even more frequently. Sophia wrapped her arms around my waist, her gaze falling on Will, who was having a lively conversation with Sam not far away. What's going on with you two? Why are you getting divorced? No feelings left, I replied. She scoffed, your eyes are telling me you're lying. As for him, he looks like a lovesick puppy. No feelings? Yeah, right. I pushed her hand away and gave a fake smile, worry about yourself instead. Aren't you nervous about meeting Sam's parents tomorrow? Oh. She sighed, and the conversation shifted to what outfit would be appropriate for tomorrow. We were going to shoot the last set of photos today. At some point, Will and Sam started chatting. When Sam arrived, he had an apologetic look, clearly aware of what was going on between me and Will. I'm sure Sam had a big part in Will finding me here. I glanced at Sophia, who was talking about her fears and excitement about meeting Sam's parents tomorrow. She radiated happiness. I couldn't help but wonder, if every marriage ends up like mine and Will's, what would happen to my Sophia? Sophia is loyal and soft-hearted. I just hope Sam is different from Will. The breeze was perfect, and the shoot went smoothly. Will was running around, carrying the camera and helping direct the shoot. My two assistants awkwardly stood off to the side as their work was completely taken over. Is that your husband? One of my younger female assistants whispered. I glanced at her. Ex-husband. She froze, sneaking a glance at Will and then back at me. Later, at dinner in a restaurant, I went to the restroom for a moment, and when I came back, the only seat left was the one next to Will. Sophia and the assistants were all visibly excited, signaling me to sit there. I raised an eyebrow and casually took the seat. Throughout dinner, the conversation kept circling back to me and Will. I kept a straight face, either answering with a brief response or forcing a laugh when I didn't want to. That night, Sophia insisted on sleeping with me. We lay side by side in bed. You're not happy today, she stated confidently. I smiled but didn't say anything. She turned on her side, propping her head up with one hand. Are you really going through with the divorce? Yes. There was a long silence. After a while, she said gloomily, I wonder which woman will get lucky in the future. Will's company wouldn't be where it is today without your help. I was unexpectedly amused and patted her shoulder in reassurance. Don't worry, even after the divorce, half the company is mine. I'll still be able to take care of you. Really? When have I ever taken a loss? True. After Sophia and Sam finished their wedding photos, I gave my assistants some time off and decided to enjoy myself for a bit. Will insisted on tagging along, and I didn't refuse. We toured various attractions in S-City together. 7 years of marriage, and this was our first trip together. When I got tired, he let me rest on his shoulder. When we climbed a mountain and I couldn't go on, he carried me to the top. We watched the sunset from the peak and the sunrise by the sea. We looked like an ordinary couple on vacation, as if there had never been any fights or weariness between us. For a moment, I wondered if I had been too firm in my decision to divorce. Maybe this experience would make us better. But I quickly dismissed that thought. On the last day of the trip, I received an anonymous message. The room was pitch black, silent except for the faint light from my phone and the occasional soft moan from the video. After what felt like forever, I stiffly raised my hand and with all my strength, hurled the phone across the room. It hit the ground with a heavy thud, the screen shattering into pieces, and finally, the sound stopped. The intertwined bodies from the video replayed in my mind, my stomach churning. I dry heaved in the bathroom for what seemed like hours, but nothing came out. When I looked up, I was startled by my own reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was pale, with disheveled hair, looking like a ghost. I splashed cold water on my face, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I had always suspected Will of cheating, but I trusted his character, believing it was only an emotional affair, that he wouldn't cross that line. But that video hit me like a slap in the face. That faint perfume I smelled on Will the day he came to S-City, the healing scratch marks on his back, and his constant apologies while holding me, all came rushing back. Will had slept with another woman, then had the audacity to play the victim in front of me. I realized I might have some sort of purity complex. Just thinking about the places he touched me, the frequent physical contact we had over the past few days, made my skin crawl. Sensing something, Will texted me from the next room. "Amanda, there's a great restaurant downstairs. How about we try it tomorrow morning? Are you asleep? Good night." I changed my flight and got up before dawn. Before boarding the plane, I sent him the video and a message. "Meet me at the Civil Affairs office at 9 a.m. tomorrow." When I landed and turned on my phone, missed calls and message notifications flooded in, causing the phone to lag. Most were from Will, with a couple from Sophia and Sam. "Sophia, back home?" "Me, just landed." As I walked out of the airport, memories of our first visit to this city came flooding back. Back then, we had nothing but passion and ambition, and Will's gaze was full of love when he looked at me. Amidst the crowded city, with the noise of life surrounding us, he had said, "I'm going to make so much money and give you the happiest life in the world." The past few decades felt like a fleeting dream. The glitz and glamour of the big city had blinded us, making us lose sight of our original intentions. The next morning, the sky was overcast, threatening rain. Will was waiting at the entrance of the Civil Affairs office as promised. After seeing the video, he probably didn't have the face to explain himself anymore, so he didn't say much. By the time we came out, the dark clouds had scattered, and sunlight poured over the earth. He mumbled, "I was drunk that night. It only happened once. It doesn't matter anymore." I waved without turning back. In the end, Will still had some decency, giving me an extra 10% of the company shares, making me the largest shareholder. He wanted the villa, and I agreed, on the condition that I take out everything I had decorated it with. Afterward, I signed up for a travel group and toured around the country, looking for photography inspiration. Some of my works even won awards. Every now and then, I'd hear about Will. He fired Nina, who caused a scene at the company, claiming she was pregnant and calling him a scumbag. Will made her get an abortion in front of the whole office. Later, it turned out Nina wasn't pregnant at all, but Will's drinking problem was real. The following summer, Sophia and Sam got married. And that's when I saw Will again at their wedding. He was so thin it was frightening, his clothes hung loosely on him, like a skeleton wrapped in fabric. When Sam put the ring on Sophia, his hands trembled so much that he almost dropped it. He tried several times before he managed to get it on. When he said his vows, he stuttered, struggling for a long time before he finally blurted out a name. I was moved to tears, overwhelmed with emotion for Sophia's happiness. Through the blur of my tears, I met Will's gaze across from me. His eyes were filled with tears, and his lips moved as if to speak. Maybe he was remembering our own wedding, when he was so nervous he could barely get the words out, and all that love he had for me came down to just one line, "I do." In the third spring, I received the news that Sophia was pregnant, and I was overjoyed. Her daughter was born at the end of winter, and I put aside my work to be there for the birth. The baby was very calm, sleeping most of the time. Even when she was awake, she was quiet and smiled at everyone she saw. Many people came to the baby's full-month celebration, including Will. I hadn't seen him in so long, and he had changed a lot. The midlife crisis had finally caught up with him, his hairline had receded quite a bit, and he was starting to show signs of weight gain. I tried hard to reconcile this man in front of me with the Will I knew back in school. In the fourth summer, I received an unsigned letter. It was typed and contained only one sentence: "I hope you're happy." In the end, I left the letter in a trash bin somewhere local. I had too much luggage to carry anything extra. The end.